birthright citizenship. If you've been living under a rock and you're not aware of what's going on, Donald Trump took to trying to get rid of birthright citizenship. And a federal judge in Maryland has issued a nationwide preliminary injunction against President Trump's executive order aimed at ending birthright citizenship. Judge after judge after judge after judge has gone after him, saying this is blatantly unconstitutional. So let's take a look at this. I pulled this up from the American Immigration Council, going over what is birthright citizenship. For people who are unaware, birthright citizenship is something that was enshrined in the Constitution right after the Civil War. It was specifically referring to African Americans and trying to allow those who were born here that right. This was then solidified in a Supreme Court ruling shortly thereafter by Wong Kim Ark, United States versus Wong Kim Ark. So this is kind of a summary. Let's go ahead and dive a little bit into this and see exactly what it was that created birthright citizenship. Birthright citizenship is a legal principle under which citizenship is automatically granted to individuals upon birth. There are two forms of birthright citizenship: ancestry-based citizenship and birthplace-based citizenship. Birthplace-based citizenship, which grants citizenships based on place of birth, is formally referred to as jus soli, a Latin term meaning right of the soil. In the United States, birthright citizenship is guaranteed by the 14th Amendment. Now, guys, keep in mind, this is something else I want to mention as we're going through this. Donald Trump has already gone after our First Amendment rights, right? He wants to jail people who burn the American flag, and I understand how controversial that stance is, but the reality is it is a protected form of free speech. He's gone after the First Amendment, he's gone after the Second Amendment, and I don't know if we'll cover it today, but he's also mentioned that he wants to send American prisoners overseas to a more hostile environment, if so to speak, which could potentially violate the 8th Amendment. And here it is now, he's going after the 14th Amendment. So the question is how many other amendments on this bingo card are we going to go after before we realize, and this to the point of the title of the stream, which is MAGA doesn't stand for the Constitution. If they did, they would try to uphold it as best as they could. But here it is, they're consistently trying to violate that Constitution. Now, keep in mind the due process constitutional right could be potentially be violated by the way that they are trying to handle these immigration issues and these deportation issues. So there are tons and tons of these issues right now that are facing our country. And this is like completely just wrecking our country and testing our limits. So let's continue here. In the United States, birthright citizenship is guaranteed by the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. Specifically, it states that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction of, this is very important, the jurisdiction of, thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. This principle was confirmed by the 1898 Supreme Court case United States v. Wong Kim Ark. Look that up. Essentially what it was there was a Chinese national who had a child here in the United States. After the Civil War, one of the big things that were taking place was they needed more labor because now the slaves were freed, and so they had to have more labor, and so they brought over Chinese labor, and so it was just kind of a switch up, right? So because of that, there was a Chinese citizen who had a child here in the United States, and so they took it to this, and they determined that that child is, in fact, a citizen of the United States. There are exceptions to this, obviously. Which clarify that children born in the U.S. to immigrant parents are citizens regardless of their parents' immigration status. The U.S. employs a combination of unrestricted birthplace citizenship, jus soli, granting citizenship to anyone born on U.S. soil, regardless of their parents' status, with exceptions like children of foreign diplomats. And that makes a lot of sense because children of foreign diplomats are not really inherently U.S. citizens, U.S. diplomats are not really U.S. citizens. They're here essentially performing a job on behest of their government. So it's not really the same. Restricted ancestry-based citizenship, extending citizenship to children born abroad to U.S. citizens, provided statutory requirements are met. So essentially, if you are, I don't know, in this case, it'd probably be maybe like an undocumented immigrant who's maybe serving in the military, maybe something along those lines. I believe undocumented immigrants can serve in the military. Globally, birthright citizenship is common in the Americas, but less so in other regions. The historical foundation of this principle in the U.S. reflects its aim to eliminate legal inequalities, and promote inclusivity. So again, Donald Trump is wanting to get rid of this because this is actually, I believe, part of Project 2025. We'll get to that one later. But yeah, so we're seeing that now where Donald Trump wants to get rid of birthright citizenship, and federal judges were like, bro, This is patently unconstitutional. In fact, let's go ahead and see what the judge said in this article here. Pull this up real quick. Let's see. Yeah, it just said that essentially is, Socrates, what's going on, buddy? Welcome in, man. Haven't seen you in a minute. We're talking about birthright citizenship right now as we're kind of going over some of the details about it, but not very much. So anyways, here it is is just saying that it could cause irreparable harm. A nationwide injunction is appropriate and necessary because it concerns citizenship. In her ruling, Judge Boardman said Trump's executive order conflicts with the plain language. Guys, I want you to know, if you want to jump in, sure. I'll test it out here in just a minute. Maybe not, Socrates, because I'm streaming on multiple platforms right now, and so I don't want to mess anything up on that. Maybe another time. Catch me on Monday. We'll try to do it on Monday, okay, or Friday. I stream Monday and Fridays, but just let me know. But anyways, think about this. The judge in this order said conflicts with the plain language of the 14th. Guys, understand. Plain language. This is like, bro, you're just like inherently false on this. It's not like she's saying, well, the spirit of the law says this and court and precedent, this. She said the plain language of the 14th Amendment. It's pretty important. And we'll get into the USAID. I do want to get into the USAID. This thing here is pretty crazy. So here's the thing about this. There was actually let me see if I can find it. I may not have it. There's been rumors that immigration officials are actually going in and searching buses. Immigration officials saying this is just patently untrue, but a superintendent for a school district close to the border said that at a checkpoint, there's been reports that they are boarding buses and checking them. Now, keep in mind, Donald Trump has already said and rescinded the order to prohibit ICE agents from going into schools and going into churches. Listen, I'm not somebody, I was a MAGA supporter, and I'm ashamed that I was a MAGA supporter for up to about 2020 or 2021. What we're seeing right now is pretty scary for anybody who's an undocumented immigrant, and even more so somebody who's a little bit of a darker complexion than I am. And I'll tell you why. All rules are off. They can go in and do stop and frisk. There's been instances in which they are handing police officers in your local jurisdiction the authority to enforce immigration laws, in which case they normally don't, but because it's the Trump administration, they are enforcing these. And so that's what they're doing. And that means they can stop and frisk. That means if you've got the broken tail light, they may ask you for those things and that stuff. So it kind of scares me a little bit about what's going on there. Churches, we can imagine where an undocumented immigrant is inside of a church and the pastor is, letting them stay there. And now all of a sudden you are faced with harboring a fugitive. We've seen Tom Homan openly state that he's potentially going to go after governors and mayors for harboring undocumented immigrants, which makes zero sense. We have seen where they are sending immigrants to Guantanamo Bay. Now, they say it's criminals, but here's the thing. We have seen Kristi Noem refuse to say whether or not they are going to be sending women and children. She's refused to say, which is safe to assume that they will. We've seen Donald Trump lose numerous deals in Colombia, in Mexico, and Canada regarding these tariffs. When he went to Colombia, there's a letter out there. You can go check it out. It's from the Colombian president that states basically, look, you want to impose a tariff on me? Well, I'm going to impose a 50% tariff right back at you. And that was at the point in which Donald Trump caved and made a deal with Colombia. In the case of Canada, they agreed to send 10,000 troops to the border that they were already going to do. In the case of Canada, we saw something similar. In the case of Canada, they ended up saying that they were going to do a $1.5 billion package. Yeah, guess what? That $1.5 billion package was already going to happen. So Donald Trump is trying to make it look like he's doing all these amazing deals and everything else. But he's not really doing that, is he? American Patriot Doghouse mad that America is winning. America's not winning. We're looking like a fool on the national stage. Brendan Herrera, director of ATF, go right on. At this point, we've got the whole circus at the head of these federal agencies. They're called illegals. They're called undocumented immigrants. You can call them illegals if you want to. You want to be derogatory, that's fine. Go ahead. Children that are with the adults aren't even the parents. The parents are still in Mexico. No, the parents are here in the United States. And these children, by the way, here's the other thing, too, to think about this. You have a lot of conundrums where you're going to see undocumented immigrants who they very well may have someone who committed a crime, an undocumented immigrant who committed a crime here in the United States, and they're out on bond. And so because of that, their bond conditions say that they have to stay at a certain address. Okay, they say they have to stay at a certain address. And then guess what happens? ICE comes knocking at the door, provides them with an administrative warrant, which is not a judicial warrant. They believe that they have to let these ICE agents into their home. The ICE agent finds that the other two people that are living in that residence are undocumented immigrants, and then they arrest those people. There could be even a U.S. citizen in that household. And now that U.S. citizen is being arrested for harboring a fugitive. This is a very, very real reality that we are living in under a Donald Trump administration. It is extremely concerning to me. Before, with Joe Biden's administration, they went after certain particular kinds, right? National security threats. That was the one that the Joe Biden administration focused on. Not somebody who simply crossed the border illegally and violated U.S. Section 1325, which, by the way, 1325, the penalties are a like $600 fine and up to 6 months of imprisonment, which, again, anybody who knows anything about law understands that the 6 month imprisonment is not going to happen, right? Unless you have some kind of a, again, it's one of those sentencing guidelines. That's just not going to happen. But anyways, these are things that are going to happen. Stop and frisk is going to happen. People are already calling in to the ICE hotline because they see somebody walking down the street that doesn't look a whole lot like them. And when you ask these MAGA about how they know, they don't. And it comes down to it, they're profiling. Plain, Jane, and simple. That's exactly what's happening. We are living back in the 1940s where we had Japanese internment camps. That is what we're living in at this very, very moment. And I don't like that. I don't like that we're living in this area. Because here's the other issue. Donald Trump has said numerous times that what's happening in other countries is they're sending their prisoners, they're opening up their asylums, right? Because he doesn't understand the difference between political asylum or immigration asylum and actual insane asylums. But he thinks that they're actually sending their asylum seekers here. And so let me get this right. He wants to take the criminals out of the United States, send them back to the same country that sent them here in the first place. Now, there's been videos going around of undocumented immigrants that are across the Rio Grande that are being followed by 6 military personnel. Why? Because the military personnel cannot arrest them. It's for the exact same reason that they loaded up 3 or 4 migrants onto a huge cargo plane to send them to Guantanamo Bay. It's for theatrics. They want you, MAGA, to feel like they're actually doing something when they're really not. Now, to be clear, they are arresting undocumented immigrants. Let's be very clear about that. But there is an element of theatrics that is certainly playing in here. You mean the Gitmo concept? Yeah. Shocker, right? And keep in mind, it is a black site, which means that who knows what can go on down there. There's not, the Republicans who loved accountability, transparency. We need transparency. We need transparency. Where's the transparency here? Are they going to allow Congress members to walk into that facility and make sure that it's being ran the way it ought to be ran? Are they going to allow for that? No. We already see what they're happening at the USAID headquarters, where they're not letting in Congress members. I believe it's USAID. Might even be Social Security. Right, ANCOM. They're arresting immigrants, but so did Biden and Obama. This isn't exactly new. Right. So they are arresting immigrants. That in and of itself quite isn't the problem, right? The problem is to the degree at which we are arresting people, the degree to which we are enforcing these laws, right? There's nothing wrong with arresting undocumented immigrants that have committed crimes here in the United States. That is not a big deal. So that's the big issue here. Is they're going in, They are doing things like stop and frisk. They are doing things where there's a broken taillight, so they pull you over, and then now because of that police officer, they now have the. One second. So we have all of these undocumented immigrants who are going in, and they are absolutely doing these things. Yo, long leg, what's going on, buddy? Cut a dog hair stream. Yes, sir. You have walked into the doghouse. Welcome in, buddy. Yeah, and a lot of these MAGA are not ready for these conversations. They don't quite understand. And we'll get into that when we look at the USAID conversation. They don't know what they're looking at. They don't understand Civics 101. This is the same reason that they believed that Joe Biden was opening up immigration beds with FEMA money, because they don't understand that Congress passes these laws. They don't understand that the president signs these laws and that there are certain rules that both of them have to follow. There's a checks and balance. But MAGA is not ready for that conversation. So on that note, let's roll ahead and go in, and I want to give my last spiel on this because I do think this is very important. When undocumented immigrants are concerned about where they, what their future is here in this country, they are completely valid in their fear of being deported because of how this country, and I'll be very clear, if you're a U.S. citizen and you are of a Hispanic descent, you are valid in feeling that fear. And the reason why is because we don't have transparency. We don't know the exact numbers. There's reports of U.S. citizens being detained. U.S. citizens being detained because of these policies. All because they are questioning their citizenship status. And you might say, well, it'll work its way out through the courts. Yeah, that's after they've paid an insane amount of money to get out of that predicament in the first place, if they're lucky. We've already seen U.S. citizens being deported under, believe it was Obama or Biden or Trump, one of the two. Under the Remain in Mexico policy, there was U.S. citizens that were deported under that. Longleg said, even as a lefty, I have so many more issues with the stuff Elon is doing than any issues that I've had with Trump. Yeah, there's a lot. The unelected bureaucrats that Republicans screamed about make an exception for Elon Musk, even though he's been propped up by the federal government and only turned a profit in 2020. We'll get into that. Glaring Husky, I didn't realize you became a liberal. Yes, well, here's the thing. Did I become a liberal? Or is it that the right has gone so batshit crazy that they've moved so far right that I'm left on my little own island going, where did everybody go? And now here I am in the center left. And I have no problem with that. The amount of indecency, the amount of inhumanity that is on the right now is insane to me. It's insane to me. That's not what the Republican Party stands for. I have seen people, I actually heard somebody today on a TikTok live say that George Bush is a rhino. The George Bush. Yeah, is a rhino. Think about what they'd said. Remember, Donald Trump loved the idea of the party of Reagan. The party of Reagan. Party of Reagan. And they're not. So let's dive into this. Yeah, Longleg. This is what they believe. If you want to venture into this realm, it's kind of crazy. Well, listen, they've already called Bush. I've got one of them already saying Bush is a rhino. They're on their way to say that as well.